Welcome to Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation possible. You will get to hear from CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve process challenges and how they've earned success in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, you will enjoy the insights these industry professionals bring to this podcast. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Lisa Richter, the host of Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation and processing possible. In today's episode, we're talking industrial automation with Tony Valasek, Director of Engineering for EOSYS. In this role, he is responsible for project delivery oversight, employee performance, and career development. Tony also represents the engineering team's perspective in recruiting, best practices, and corporate planning and development. He joined the company in 2009 as the engineering manager. All told, Tony has over 30 years of engineering and manufacturing experience in diverse international industries with various industry leaders. Tony earned a Bachelor of Science in Aerospace Engineering, an MBA, and a PhD in Business Administration with a specialization in international business. And if that's not enough, Tony is also a certified project management professional, a certified MBTI practitioner, as well as a U.S. patent holder. Plus, he is the chair of CSIA's Best Practices Committee. And it is in that capacity that he is here today because the CSIA Best Practices Manual 6.0 was recently released. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you want to hear more about Tony himself, you can listen to episode 67 because he was the guest on that episode. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me today, Lisa.
Let's start with the basics. What is the Best Practices Manual?
Well, the Best Practice Manual is the most comprehensive collection of best practices within the control system integrators industry. It was put together by integrators for integrators. In many ways, it's the manifestation of CSIA's mission statement, which is to advance the industry of the control system integration.
What's in the BP and how is it organized?
The manual is currently comprised of 10 areas, and it covers most aspects of a control system integrator's business. These include general management, HR, sales marketing, finance, project management, IT, quality, and a few broader supporting topics.
That sounds like a lot. So is this a big, huge, giant manual? Talk to me about the size of it.
It is pretty comprehensive and a little big, I guess. Don't want to be too scary, but as stated previously, it's a comprehensive document. So currently it stands at about 250 pages and contains a wealth of information about our industry and how to run a business within it.
So you mentioned that it's written by system integrators for system integrators, but can you tell me a little bit more about who actually develops the content?
Yeah, the Best Practice Committee is the team responsible for the content, and that committee consists of approximately 12 people. It includes myself and others from various integrators, and it's also supported by auditors, some legal counsel, and as well as some of the other committees that CSIA has, and of course, CSIA staff as well.
So it sounds like it's a pretty big job to put this thing together. So how often do you tackle this? How often is it revised?
The manual typically goes on a 3 to 4 year cycle.
How do you vet the content? I imagine that's part of the process as well.
It is. So the committee gathers information from various sources, such as the people I mentioned that participate, and we typically divide and conquer by forming some small teams of those groups, 2 to 3 people typically, to address topics for each area. Most of the time, the members are working on areas where they both have a higher level of interest and expertise. They're free to coordinate, of course, when it's convenient for them to do so. And once they have something that needs reviewed at a higher level, they'll bring it up to the full committee, and then we'll review that to ensure that the overall quality of the content. Since it is a 3 to 4 year process, there are times when new information does become available during the process that we have to consider and work into that. We then meet as a larger group monthly to discuss progress, some challenges that we may be facing, and any overall progress or the overall process as it is formed today.
And then do you do any like beta testing or run it by people outside of the committee at all?
Certain areas, like we may run our finance committee or finance section by somebody in the finance field a little more proper. Certainly there's a legal review, things of that nature. And again, we'll incorporate some maybe partner members, not necessarily integrators, but more experts in their particular field, just to kind of give us a little bit of an idea. But we also, before we release it, we try to do pilot audits. So it kind of gives us a sense to make sure that we're on par or on target with what we were trying to do, and it wasn't anything confounding or confusing for any of our integrator people.
So to be clear on that, so a lot of people use the best practices as a way to prepare for the certification, which requires an audit. So when you're saying an audit, first couple audits after the new manual comes out, you want to make sure that the audit matches the content, basically. What's new in 6.0?
So listeners here should be pleased to know that we supplied a high-level summary of the major changes and some FAQs that we anticipate, and those can be found on CSIA's website. And I'd encourage you to download that document. But with that said, there are several significant changes and additions to version 6 that I'd like to just highlight here. It's not going to be a comprehensive list of things because, again, it's a big document. But to begin with, a section was added in the general management section to discuss business ethics. This is both necessary from an integrity perspective of our companies, but we're also finding that integrators are being asked about policies that are in place to mitigate concerns related to fraud and corruption kind of activities that unfortunately do occur in the world. In addition, there's now a section that touches upon cybersecurity attacks and the impact they're having on our, of course, technologically sensitive industry that we're in. One of the most significant changes is an overhaul to the sales and marketing section. Digital aspects have been included, as well as substantial differentiation between sales and marketing, which for some are still kind of used interchangeably. The project management section was modified to include some consideration to the supply chain management issues that many of us had to face over the last few years, as well as we now have a dedicated section to agile project management. We have an initial foray into the remote workforce kind of challenges that we're facing, though we will have some more work to do that in a future revision. The quality section is more focused and keys in on the core aspects of maintaining a high quality organization, not just a quality output, but how is your organization built around the concept of quality? And then the IT section has been updated to provide much more clarity regarding information and cybersecurity of the integrator itself, not necessarily a solution, but the companies themselves, and include references to updated standards that are out there and in industry as well. And then the addition of some of that technical content, we also have updated certification levels. There's 3 levels. That's driven primarily from a company's revenue. And those have been adjusted to provide a more practical grouping of expectations so that we don't have a company that's just still kind of sort of considered small, trying to meet the same level that a company that may have a lot more people or more sophistication already in place.
How do you know what to update?
Well, in a word, feedback. Those of us on the committee represent a wide swath of integrators, and we provide firsthand knowledge of the pressures we feel in our businesses and changes we're experiencing in our own companies. We do get feedback from auditors who work with many integrators intimately and other partner members such as technology suppliers, as well as some legal counsel. And then on occasion, we'll issue a few surveys to get at what maybe are the most important topics that we should be addressing from an end user perspective.
I mentioned earlier that the best practices manual is often the starting point for an organization looking to get certified. Can you explain a little bit more what CSIA certification really is?
Sure. And the technical answer is your company has met the minimum best practice requirements of CSIA's certification program. And that's evidenced by an audit of your company's processes. However, in a practical manner, the way I look at it is CSIA certification is really the validation that your company has adopted and implemented the key elements of the best practices for integrators for the size of business you're in. And it's also a confirmation that your company has a solid foundation in all aspects of business, not just delivering a project, in order to build and grow your company.
So the best practices manual is not just for companies looking to get certified, correct?
That is correct. CSIA members, certified or not, do have access to the best practices manual. And as spoken, and probably will continue to say, there is a wealth of information there collected quite literally from generations of leaders in the industry. We're on version 6.0, and this was all started like in 1994. So there's a lot of history there and a lot of giants, if you will, that came before. So there's a lot of wealth of information that's been collected over a quite long period of time. And then companies can use that information. They can pick and choose the areas they deem more appropriate to work on or improve on in their own businesses. I would say that, companies should look at this manual as almost like a business consultant, if you could put a human face on it, if you will. I would say companies generally join CSIA, at least the ones I talk to learn how to be better from others. That's kind of the big draw. And this manual is really the codified version of the answers you would get if you were to ask a peer how they would do something or how do they get better. What's the next thing?
OMG. Can you believe it's the middle of the year already? I find that, shocking. On the upside, it means I can offer you something special if one of your goals is to join CSIA. And why wouldn't you? This global community has so much to offer SIs, from best practices to certification, professional development, and even access to professional services experts, including insurance, financial, and legal, who understand the SI's unique business needs. For partner members, CSIA offers an ecosystem to grow your SI programs, understand your customers' pain points, monitor industry trends, and share your thought leadership. Best of all, CSIA is a soft place to land. By that, I mean it is a community of like-minded people who are willing to share, commiserate, and celebrate your wins, your losses, and your vision. So what are you waiting for? Oh, wait, you're probably waiting for my special offer. Here it is. For the months of July and August, membership dues and all Industrial Automation Exchange upgrades and packages are half price. And no, this is not half off like I am Crazy Jimmy yelling, everything must go. It's really just because CSIA prorates its dues, but boy, that lacks excitement, doesn't it? To find out more, visit www.controlsys.org/shine. Wait, maybe I should do the Crazy Jimmy route after all. Why do you think companies go ahead and get certified?
This would seem to be easy, but it's actually a little more complicated. I answer this question in terms of the value that not only certification it provides, but it's the process of obtaining the certification that sometimes escapes what people are thinking when they hear the word certification, because it's a very tangible item. And the reality is there can be both intrinsic and extrinsic value to this. For example, at EOSYS, the main value we got when we pursued certification the first time was that it provided a tangible benchmark target to achieve, something that we could focus on and rally on as a company. The journey to get that improvement was the real value. It's nice to have certification, but it really was the journey of improvement that got us that. That certification itself was the validation that we reached a certain level. And then extrinsically, there is some benefit to marketing, but I honestly would hesitate to tell companies to go for it if they think that the piece of paper and the act of checking the box is going to give them enough of a reason to proceed. They should be asking, how will this help them drive themselves to be a better company?
So a lot of times I get asked the question, what's the difference between CSIA certification and ISO? I'm sure you get asked as well. And how do you answer that?
On occasion, and I have worked for organizations that were ISO certified, and there is quite a different information there. So, ISO is the organization that publishes quite a bit of good content in general. But when I'm asked this question, most of the time, people are referring to ISO 9001. At least that's what I find, which is a well-accepted quality standard, and it does deserve both respect and attention for what it contains. But with that context in mind, in the hierarchy of the documentation types, ISO 9001 is really a standard, where the best practices and benchmarks manual does contain standard language, points that are audited, for example, but also contains a significant amount of information that one would find in a guideline, which are recommendations that would necessarily be considered imperatives, thou shalts. In addition, the best practices and benchmarks manual provides considerable guidance for focus for a control system integrator versus a very broad group of companies for all aspects of the business, whether it be finance and accounting, HR, IT, or project management. So those are some additions or differentiations that I find between the two standards.
Looking ahead, what's your prediction for what 7.0 will look like?
There are already a few areas we already know we will need to expand upon. One is, while we're covering a section in Agile in this current version 6, that's going to need to be expanded. We're going to have to continue to improve that section and build upon that. The other approach that we're seeing is a valid model for many solutions, and the lines between the ISA 95 levels, 0 through 4, are becoming a little fuzzy. With regard to the solutions being requested, it's a little hard to find that hard line between what they're looking for. We'll also need to be gathering some best practices to address the increasing importance of managing hybrid and remote workforces. I see that as an addition in the next revision, or at least an expansion upon what we currently have. And then another area that will definitely need more attention is the increasing demand for service contracts in the integration industry, which isn't very prevalent. It's just continuing to grow. I'm sure there'll be others that come along. As I mentioned, this is a 3 to 4 year process, so things do happen, and we'll look at those things as they come up. But those are some things we already have on our docket, if you will, to beef up in version 7.0.
So revising this manual clearly demands hours and hours of volunteer time. Let's underscore that. This is all volunteers. Why in the world do you and the other committee members do it?
The reality is the people on this committee are very high achieving. They're driven individuals, and they're geared and wired to improve. That's like in their DNA. They know that making this manual better helps both them and their companies improve as well. Not just receiving the manual or downloading it, the act of the creation does provide significant value for them. The investment maintenance process is, I'll consider it symbiotic and a win-win. As a member myself, of course, I know that I can always learn something from anybody. And surrounding myself with the caliber of people that is on this committee can only help me be better myself, and then subsequently the company that I work for. So the sweat equity and the investment given by myself for this committee is, quite frankly, far outpaced by the benefit I receive just in the networking and the little tips and the tricks that you learn from the people that you work with on a regular basis.
How do you select the BP committee members? Are there certain qualifications that you're looking for?
Well, qualifications may be an overstretched term, I think, in here, but they really are simple. First of all, you got to be willing to serve, because like you said, it's a volunteer workforce here. You're not getting paid per se, at least in terms of dollars. The time commitment is very manageable. On average, I would say 2 hours a month over that 3 to 4 year cycle, but it's not spread out evenly. There are certain periods of time when there's a little bit heavier concentrations of that time, get towards the end, wrapping things up, doing a lot of editing. There might be a little bit heavier concentrations at that time. But on average, 2 hours a month. We meet once a month for an hour, and then the other, I would say, is dedicated to, again, a little bit of homework that we do on some smaller subcommittees or subgroups that we are working on. We're looking for people to be members of CSIA, but not necessarily, you don't have to be from a certified company. It's a plus, to be quite frank, because you are familiar with that certification process. It just gives you a little bit of knowledge there, but you do not have to be from a certified company to be part of this group. And then, of course, I have to say it, I don't want anybody to assume, but yeah, you should make sure that you have support by the company that you work for to actually contribute to this effort. But that's about it, Lisa.
Are you looking for volunteers to work on 7.0? And if so, what's the process?
We are looking for volunteers, and this is probably the ideal time to join since we are wrapping up the version 6. The benefits that gives you now is that it gives you a little bit of a cleaner start than if you were to join somewhere in the middle of the process, a year and a half, 2 years later. And you'll have just a little bit easier time coming up to speed with how we do things, as well as acclimating to the existing group of people that we have on the team. So if you are interested, either reach out to myself directly at tony.valasek@eosysgroup.com. My contact information is also listed under CSIA's website under the About section. And then you have to further select committees, and you'll find the Best Practices Committee there with a link to my email address there. You can also reach out to anyone on CSIA staff they'll forward your information appropriately to me. And then I'll reach out to you. We'll have an introductory call. I just want to get to know you a little bit better, try to understand what your interests are, answer any questions that you have about, what does it take, the commitments, the process, anything that you have to ask me. I'll be glad to help you with that. And then just some administrative things we'll get you set up with, making sure that you get the meeting invites and listed on the committee through CSIA, so you have access to things like meeting minutes and such and so forth like that. But then, of course, then you'll join our regular meetings on a monthly basis. And it's pretty simple, actually.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Talking Industrial Automation. If you are interested in learning more about the Best Practices Manual, visit www.controlsys.org/best practices. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Tony, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me again, Lisa.
If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also really help the show by leaving a review and sharing with colleagues. We're all just slaves to the algorithm now, so I gotta ask. Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Thanks also to bensound.com and Wistia for the music bumpers. Until next time.